Robo Papa. So this is video 3 out of 3. This is the last video for the FlashForge Creator Pro. The previous two videos we showed the unboxing of the 3D printer, and the second video was showed how to build the acrylic cover as well as the acrylic door and aligning the nozzles, and then we did a test print. Now it's time for us actually to install the softwares, that way we can design our own models. Then in order to do that, we need to install 5 softwares. The first one, which you can find in your SD card, but in case that the SD card got lost or damaged, you can come to replicate.org and download the Replicator G40, because the Pro of FlashForge is on Selfish firmware. Then we need to also install a slicing software, which will use the slicer with the number 3, not the E, which will depend on a Python interpreter, which will be we'll download the PyPy. And then we'll need a software that translates the G codes to something that the replicator can read, which will use the GPX. And then of course you have to have like a 3D design tool, and we will use the Autodesk 123. It's a freeware and it's a free software, and you can pay to go premium, but I think you can do a lot with a free edition. So I'll start by going and downloading, which I did ahead of time, and I have them over here. To download Slicer, you just go to Slicer with the number 3 instead of e.org. Currently the stable version is 1.17.7, and that's what I'm recommending you to download. You just clicking the download, choosing the OS that you have. I'm using Windows, and taking the stable version, which I already downloaded, as I said, and it's right over here. Then you need to Replicator G, which you go to this Replicator G and installing the software over here. The PyPy, which you can come to pypy.org, click the download, and then choose the Python 2.7 in Windows binaries. Under Thingiverse, we wanted to get the GPX, so on the search box, just search for GPX. And the first tile that you will see, which is the GPX G code 2x3G, we click on that, and then under the thing files, there will be, right now there's 3 files, because I'm using Windows, we'll take this one, and then obviously we'll download the Autodesk 123D. So we'll start by actually installing GPX. It's not really an installation, as you can see on the file over here. It's just a bunch of files. So we can go and copy this, and I already created a folder, and copy it into basically under C. I created my programs, and I gave it over here, and we will come back to it because we'll need to update something here. So for now, just leave the folder open. Next, we will want to install the slicer. So we'll copy that one, and inside this download folder, we'll copy it. And you can see that we already have Slicer. So once again, this is a software that we don't need to really install. So I can just copy it into my programs, which is right over here. And I can basically send this to desktop or pin to taskbar, whatever you like to have. take this pipe and copy it once again to the same programs. So now we have it. Go back to replicator. Alright, so I guess we'll need to go into settings and change that. And before we actually installing the 123D design, let's go and see that actually everything works. Because I'm thinking that, so if I take a replicator, let's pin to disk. So as soon as you start the replicator, it will start downloading updates, and it doesn't indicate when it's done. It just, you will see that the lines over here will not move, and that's where you know that it's basically done. And my printer right now is not connected to this machine, so that's why I cannot find it. But this is where you will come here to machine. It's the replicator dual, and in the serial you will choose the serial that you need. And if you cannot find it, you can just rescan it. Okay. Then we come here for preferences and select Python interpreter. And we'll give it the location where we actually downloaded the PyPy. Okay. Next, we will start the slicer, and there's a couple of settings over here that we can take advantage of. So over here you will see that you have 4 tabs. 3 of them are the important. This area is where you're actually loading your STL files, and then you can decide what you want to do with that. Under the print settings, this is where you setting up your printer, and with all different kind of settings. Under filament settings, this is where you will actually once again set up what kind of filament it is and what are the temperatures, etc. And under printer settings is where you will set up the printer. The first thing that you want to do though, come here to preference, and the mode should be actually expert. That way we can actually set up a little bit more. So we'll start the slicer. And now if we go to print settings, you can see that now we have an additional window where we can do certain things. So if we go back to the printer settings, you can see we have simple mode, and that's where we can actually save in a way kind of like profiles for our printer. That way we don't need to re-enter the same settings every single time. So what we can do is actually set up a settings for the right extruder. So like the if we want to print with the right nozzles, we can put some settings over here, like the print center or temperature. If we want to use the left, we can set it up, and then we'll do also the dual one. So the first thing we want to do is okay. So we set up the two nozzles. The bed size is 228 on 150. The printer center is 0, 0. We're using the Selfish Maker bot, and that's interesting. That looks like a bug on their software. The nozzle for the extruder 1 and extruder 1 and extruder 2 really should be the same. So it's 0.4, 0, 0 is the extruder offset. And I will just keep the settings by default over here. And then the same thing should be here. Then there's some settings on the custom G code, which I will post a link to the Google Drive, where you can download those files, where you will have some settings to tell the printer what kind of G code to start with, what kind of G code to end with. So I have them over here, and we first will do the right nozzle, and all of this you will have a link for it. And all it does, it's really just telling it where to go, what to extrude, how much to extrude. That way there will be some filament going out before you're actually starting your print, your real print. And then the end G code is just going to tell it like where to go and lower the bed, etc. You can find online what each actually command is, but compiled something for you over here. So now we can actually save it, and let's say we'll save it as FlashForge, and we'll write, so that will be the right nozzle. Okay. Alright, so now we'll do the same thing, same settings over here, same extrude settings, just that the G code now will be for the left. So we'll copy the left, and some of the differences over here is really just like the nozzle selected, like T1 is the one on the left, T0 is the one on the right. And then we'll pick up the end G code for the left, and this time we'll save it as FlashForge left. And we click OK. And now we will need to do another one, which will be for the dual nozzles. And once again, we'll have over here, it basically tells what temperature we want to take and set it to that temperature, and which position to actually put the nozzles. With the dual though, unlike the one on the right and the left, we'll have an extra piece. That's why there's like 3 files on it, which will come on the layer change G code. And this is all you need to actually add. And then the temperature and the diameter will be the same. So we will call this tool. And we click OK. So now when it's done, you can see that we have 3 basically profiles for the print settings, and obviously the simple one which came with it. So now we can go into the filament settings, and the filament settings is really depending on what filament you're using. And before you actually deciding what is the diameter, I recommend that you will actually take measurement, like a couple of measurements along the filament, the beginning of the filament, and average those, and that's the diameter that you want to put here. But for now, you can put it as 1.8. Now, as far as the temperature, ABS needs higher temperature than PLA. So just like we did with the print settings, also over here we can actually make profiles. So we will start with the ABS, and for the first layer for ABS, I'm usually printing it with 230 as well as the other layer. And because the FlashForge is with the bed, then we can set up the temperature over here for the warming bed. And as far as cooling, you can keep it like with default settings. I haven't changed mine, but you can change it. And one nice trick is yeah, it doesn't do it over here, but usually when you hover on the field, it should tell you some documentations on it. Here we go. I guess the window was not selected. So you can kind of like know a little bit more about it. So we will save this one and we'll call it ABS. And you can name it as whatever you want. If you have different kinds of filaments and they have different settings for their ABS, then you can actually name it over here. But this can be generic. Then we will use the PLA. We'll set up PLA. And for PLA, we'll use the same diameter, same extrusion multiplier. Just the temperature we'll set it to 200 for first and the other layers, and then the bed will be 45. And then we'll save it as PLA. Alright, so now we have 2 filament settings. We have the extruder settings. So now we can go into the printer settings, and you can see there's a lot of options that you can actually change here. And as you go with your prints, you will probably find the best and the right settings for you. So for me, the layer height, and you can read what it means, and like I'm not going to give you tedious descriptions, but my layer height, keep it as 0.2. The first layer height is 0.375. The perimeters, I changed that to 2, and the rest of these are the same. Infill, usually if you print with 40%, that's a very dense. Obviously can go up to 100, which means that there will not be any gap. It will just print the whole thickness. It's going to take a lot of filament as well as time. Usually I print around 15 unless I need something more like stronger than that. Fill pattern, you can choose the honeycomb. It will just like make a honeycomb in the pattern. Some people using rectilinear. It's depending on what you want. I choose just the honeycomb. The top and bottom layers, I choose the rectilinear. And then the rest of these are the same. The fill angle, it's basically tells you, it tells Slicer to detect a certain angle, and then it will start building a filling for it. Speed, it's really just by default. I think it's good settings, but you can come in and change those if you need. Skirt and brim, this is where you're setting it up. I just chose the default values for it, and this is where you can choose like the pillars, and but once again I haven't modified any of those. So let's save this one and we'll just give it a name. Call it Robo Papa. And now if we go to Platter, you can see over here that we actually have different settings. So the printer settings is Robo Papa, that's what I decided over here. And then I can choose what filament I want. Is it PLA or ABS? I recommend, because we have two of them, just choose the same one. And then depends on which one you want, you can actually choose it. And then as you're loading your STL files, you'll be able to export G codes, and that will create like the files that you can either send to your SD card and then print it from there, which is the recommended from FlashForge. You don't want your computer to suddenly shut down and right near the end of your print it stops. And plus you don't need to communicate all the code through the USB. Yeah, so that's basically Slicer. And one thing that I forgot to do is show you that under under the GPX and the GPX INI, you will have some settings over here that you will want to change, and it shows you over here like a good comment. You want to change it to the machine type. Right now it's R2, which is replicator 2. By default, what we want to change is R1D, which is the dual extruder. And then the G code flavor, with all those start and end G codes that from these files over here, which one, what does that mean, each one? So each one has its own code, wrap or MakerBot, because the FlashForge is basically a MakerBot, so we will change this one to MakerBot. And that will be it for the GPX code. All right, so basically now we want to install 123D design. So let's create something very simple. This is not going to be a tutorial about how to use this Autodesk, but just for now, the snap, you want to make it as the lower it is, the closer the snaps will be, and you will not need to move a lot. Usually you want to start with a sketch, that way you can start with the 2D plane and then move towards the 3D world. So for example, if we want just to create a simple box, and I'm using right now millimeters, which is a good idea to keep it because the printer is in millimeters, so that at least that way you know that it's one to one and you don't need to do any conversions. So if we start with a sketch of rectangle, and we'll tell it what plane we want to snap it, and we'll just click, and then you can move it around, or as you can see, there's the blue with the number, So I can decide, let's say I want to make a cube that is 25, then I click enter to log that number, and it will move to the next one. And let's say I want by 25, and then I can log that number, click again, and now we have basically a square on a 2D plane. So in order for us to print this, now we need to extrude this, so to make it as a 3D. So I just going to select the sketch that I want to extrude, and you will see this wrench over here. And when I hover on it, it gives me all the kind of options, and one of them is extrude. So when I click on that, it gives me either to put a number over here, or if I rotate it on the Z-axis, it will give me the option to actually drag it. So you can see now I can drag it. So if I want to create a cube, for example, I can put it on 25, and then once again enter to stop it. To rotate it, I just right click on my mouse and then I move it. If I want just the top view, I can do it from here. Mouse wheel will be zoom in and out. So another nice feature, you can see underneath it, we can still see the 2D or the sketch. So if we'll come over here, you can see hide sketch, and now it's gone. If I want to make, let's say I want to make a circle, let's say you have a screw that you want to go through this, and you want to create a circle for that screw to go through. So what I can actually show over here, I can show sketches, and then I can only show the outline. So now I can see it from the to the inside. So if I'll go and create it like a circle, and we'll center it so once again, click on the circle, choose the plane, and then I can choose the diameter or of the circle. So let's say we want it as 4.5. So now I can select this circle, and once again I can say extrude, and oh, selected the wrong plane. Can still work, can still extrude it down, and over here I can use the subtract. Instead of the merge, I will just use the subtract. So now if I'll show materials and outline, and we will hide the sketches, should be now a hole. There you go. So from here, what we can do is we can export it as STL, and let's give it a folder over here. And call it cube with So now we actually created an STL file, which I can now open my slicer, click add, and on the desktop we should have my STLs. So here it is. I can choose now which filament, which nozzles I want, and I can export as G-code. So if I create over here another folder named G-code, and I'll put it over there, and you can see it's already selecting the G-code file extension, and we will look at the home page or the desktop, my STL, G-code, and it created the G-code over here. So one thing that I noticed is that it didn't create the file that we can actually take it into SD card. The G-code can go into the replicator. The replicator will understand that. So if, for example, we'll go to the replicator and we'll say open, and over here we'll go to my STL G-code, and we'll select the cube. We can see, first of all the parameters that we set as the start, and then it start doing its own code, and then over here in the end it's where we're putting also the end one. From here you can actually say estimate, and it will tell you that it's going to take an hour and 5 minutes as estimation. But one thing I notice is that there's no file over here that generate to put in on a flash like SD card, that way you can take it to your printer. So I think that I'm missing something in the in Slicer. So one thing I forgot to mention is that under the print settings with output options, there's the PostScript processing, the processing script, and that's where we want to put the path to our the GPX file, the exe one, which is this one. So if I'll copy this, I'll just write gpx.exe and I'll save it. Then when I come here and I said export G-code and I save this, that should generate now. There you go, an X3G, which means that now you can take this file, put it in an SD card, and print from the printer. So just to recap, we install Slicer, which is the slicing program. We set up the printer settings for the nostrils, the extruders. We have the right, left, and the dual because we're dealing with a FlashForge Pro. And we set up the bed size and the temperatures. We put it like the custom G-code, which once again I'll post these files in the Robo Gmail or Google Drive. That way you can copy paste. We set up the filament for PLA or ABS. In the print settings, we just dealt with the layer, the infill, and one thing is we download the GPX, which is the converter to a file format or a binary format that the printer can actually read from SD card, and we put it into the post-processing script under output options. We also downloaded the Replicator G, or installed the Replicator G, which was depending on a software named PyPy, which is the interpreter for the Python. And we also installed the 123D design to basically design our own 3D modeling. That way we can print it. So please subscribe and like. If you have any comments or questions, please post it and I'll try to answer as far as my knowledge. All right, thank you guys.